To kind of preface this, what we're going to say is this is technically a review in progress for us. And it's worth caveating that it's a different kind of review in progress. Usually when we do these things, we're a little further along in our playtime with a game before we do it. However, we got this game very late. I believe it was like 48 hours before the embargo lifted, which is tight. Nevertheless, Jordan, who is reviewing it for us, has powered through and played a significant chunk of it. And the rest of us have also played the game. I mean, you played some of
a significant chunk of the first one.
Yeah, the first game. Sorry, that's what I meant. Forgetting that there's 3 games in this package. So, and the rest of us have also played a bunch of it. So this discussion is different because we're going to be talking about it, but the review itself is going to be an ongoing process for a little while, we imagine, because it's 350-ish hour games. So it'll be a while before we finalize it, but we still wanted to have some sort of video out there that gives our impressions of where we're at with it. And I think that what makes it a little easier is we're very familiar with these games to the point where playing these remakes, the changes are immediately evident to us. So we have a degree of confidence in speaking about the things that we've played thus far, and knowing that it's not going to be drastically different. So with that in mind, let's get into it and go to Jordan first as our reviewer. How are you finding it?
It's really interesting because Mass Effect 1 is the only Mass Effect game that I've only played a single time. I've played 2, 3, and Andromeda multiple times, but I played the first one like for the very first time in like 2014, 2015. So like it was pretty old at that point. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna replay this game again. The combat has not aged very gracefully in the 7 years since its release, at least on Xbox 360. I hear on the PC that mods did a fabulous job of trying to keep that game up to date. So this is my first time playing Mass Effect 1 for a second time, and man, combat's so much better. Like, there are other improvements in like other places, but combat is so much better. And I'm like, oh, I can probably play Mass Effect 1 like a few more times now, because like I'm not accidentally meleeing someone when someone charges in on me. I can actually strafe around a target because the guns actually track the Geth a little bit more easily. I'm not like running for cover and then Shepard's just awkwardly standing there because you have to press another button in order to crouch. It's just so much more seamless, and oh my god, I love it so much.
Yeah. So as a question for someone who has Jean-Luc, for someone who has way more repeated playthroughs than Jordan, and probably more than any of us, like I've maybe played that game twice, do the changes that Jordan brings up as improvements to the combat feel significant to you too?
Yeah, 300 hours according to Steam, and that's not even counting the amount of times I've played on Xbox. I have played Mass Effect 1 so many times. It's one of my favorite games. Yeah, absolutely. Because I was like just replaying it on PC like the day before to like capture some footage for our graphics comparison that we did. And switching from that to the Legendary Edition changes, it was like immediately apparent. So like Mass Effect 1, when you like the opening guns you get, it's like they were very much like BioWare trying to, they never really made a shooter before, so they were figuring out like RPG mechanics into guns. So like assault rifles just had like this crosshair that took up like a third of the screen. Bullets would fly everywhere. You wouldn't hit jack shit. It was so bad. Like it took like hours and hours and hours before you got a gun that even like felt somewhat decent to shoot. Immediately changed that. It still is like, don't go into this like after playing like Mass Effect 2 or 3 and being like, it's gonna feel exactly like that. Like I think the underlying faults of the combat system are still kind of present, but yeah, just the immediate feel of the guns is such a vast improvement. And like Jordan said, you don't feel like you're you're wrestling with it. Like that's always sort of like the big caveat with Mass Effect 1 is like, man, like the story's great and the characters and the world building. Maybe put it on casual and don't really care about the combat. And like, I think it's now in a place where it feels like you can actually engage with the combat and have like a decent time. I do think it still has, like I said, some flaws, especially when you get to some of the side content where the difficulty kind of spikes in odd places.
Yeah.
Like some of that enemy AI is rough, and some of the powers are wildly out of balance.
Well, that's the thing I was going to bring up. So they've tuned weapons. Like weapons feel so much better. And the fact that you're not restricted on which weapons you can use anymore. Like I can finally be the biotic with the sniper rifle and just like have a good time doing that.
Speaking of snipers, oh my god, snipers are so good in this one.
So like
good.
I am terrible at sniping in every other game, and I was like, I always see people talk about being the infiltrator with the sniper rifle, so I was like, I'm just gonna have a go, and I was like, oh, this is so much fun. This is like my new favorite way of playing.
Sniper rifles were literally like unusable because the sway would be like, it's like Shepard was just drunk constantly. Like it was impossible to shoot anything unless you were on like I literally, because I played on like PC, I would like learn how to like the timing of the sway, and like that's how I would like use those sniper rifles. Like I just got good at the jank. But like this is like, oh, it's just you zoom in. And you aim.
You just zoom in and it
you
works.
shoot someone like a normal video game.
The one thing that I would say though is that I still have like the biggest issue with when it comes to combat is the powers. Like you mentioned, some of them are overpowered, but also it's because, and I know this is within me, is that I get used to playing Mass Effect 2 and 3 where the powers like know where they're supposed to be going. Like they will curve around chest high crates and they will hit the person behind. And in Mass Effect 1 it's like you have to make sure it's targeted, but it's not accidentally targeted behind, because some powers won't hit if it's if your targeting is just like slightly off. And also you pretty much have to be like in a direct line to hit people. But saying that, when you do manage to get like a good combo going, I finally have Liara in my party, and I've finally got Singularity unlocked, and I've got Tali as well, so I finally feel like I've got a decent balanced party, and now I'm just like ripping through it, and it's a lot. I'm going through, I just did Therum, and the encounters that I remember taking me, like the Krogan Battle Master, when you're after you're like freeing that guy. I saw that cutscene so many times when the first time I played the game, because it was so difficult, and like that encounter was just so much better. Like, and I know that they've been working on like changing up boss encounters like that, but that was the first one I did, and I was like, oh, okay, it feels fairer.
I have to recall, like go back to the original, but I'm pretty sure they added like a cover directly in front of Shepard when that cutscene starts, which they did not have in the original. I'm pretty sure. And I was like, oh, they know people hated this.
Yeah, so kind of like bring it full circle on the combat. I think Jean-Luc pretty much hit the nail on the head, where the combat is still not the main draw of the first Mass Effect. It's the kind of thing that is I want to say a necessary evil, but that paints it in a perhaps more negative light than I intend it to. It's the thing that it's the glue that holds the rest of it together, but the rest of it is far more important. And the kind of ethos and the objective from BioWare was to kind of try and raise the quality of the combat, so it's kind of trying to be somewhere in the ballpark near Mass Effect 2 and 3, which are considerably better. I think Jordan, and you guys can tell me whether you disagree, but like I don't think it gets there, but it gets high enough where you can recommend playing Mass Effect one as an entry point again. And that's something
I no longer have to tell people just start with Mass Effect 2 and do the Genesis comic. I can actually like tell them it's like you can start with Mass Effect 1.
And it's like I understand that, like it's like this weird, like I totally get where you're coming from, Jordan, but I'm also like, but there's so much good stuff in Mass Effect 1, and like we'll get into that, but like that's the most exciting thing about this remake for me.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that there are elements of the combat that, because of the nature of the review in progress, or not the combat, the gameplay itself, Jordan hasn't fully been able to experience, and none of us have really, which is kind of like the different pacing on levels and character development and progression.
Oh, I beat the game already.
Oh, you've beat it?
Yeah, I already beat it. I beat it last night.
When have you
Jeez
slept?
Louise.
I beat it last night, and then I already started 2.
Okay then, so Jean-Luc can speak to this. What's that kind of change? What's the impact of that the squashing of the level progression? Is there anything?
So I would say because they change it now where instead of going all the way up to 60, you can like squash it down to 30. You can also go back and change that if you prefer the classic one. Mm-hmm. Personally, I found the pacing of like abilities and skills to feel really good. Like I was able to get to the end of the game and I had pretty much gotten, I think it was like level 20 out of 30, and I had gotten pretty much all the major skills I cared about. I maxed out my charm and stuff like that. So it felt like a good balance. I also felt like the combat, it does the same thing that the original Mass Effect does, where, like I said, it starts off like, man, all my equipment's garbage, and by the end, you have such good equipment that you're kind of just steamrolling everything. Like I was playing on normal, and the ending boss was like kind of a joke because I just had like the best assault rifle in the game that I bought from the Citadel. There was a weird part in the middle where I was doing a couple side missions where the power curve was way off what it should have been. And I think that's just because I wasn't doing every single side mission in the game. So I did this one particular one and it like kept kicking my ass. But that felt like a weird outlier. I would say overall, the power curve is actually like very similar to how it was in the original game. It's just like it feels better because like the shooting feels good.
So one question, you mentioned that the boss towards the end was a bit of a joke, or was very easy. Does that take away anything from like the crescendo of the actual game? Because obviously, traditionally speaking, you want the final boss, but like in my mind, I'm thinking back to it, and I don't remember caring that whether the boss was challenging or not. I remember the narrative payoff being the main thing.
Yeah.
Is that still the case? Or?
I would say so. It's hard for me to say because, like I said, I've beaten this game so many times that like I don't have that. I long have lost that perspective of a first time.
I just
player.
imagine the shepherd that you just played being the same shepherd who's gone through this 20 times, and it's just like dead-eyed Groundhog Day now, and it's like, I've done this 21 times.
For real though, it's like I know all the dialogue. I'm just like, yep, if I do this, I'll go there, and okay, I'm gonna do this because that'll be the optimal route to, get this decision. But no, it personally was fine to me because also it was like I had earned that in a sense that like I spent all my money buying a very specific like assault rifle that I knew was going to be really, really good.
Right.
And so it is that sort of like RPG fantasy of like, oh, I bought the best gear. I should be able to steamroll everything to some degree. But yeah, I didn't mind the boss fight still because again, I'm with you where it's like that final boss fight is okay. It's more about like the story that's happening around that boss fight than the actual fight itself.
Yeah. So we talked about kind of like the BioWare's objective being to raise the quality of Mass Effect's combat, which is also the same for its visuals, which are another major area of improvement in Mass Effect 1. Jordan, how did you take the visuals? What do you make of the work done to Mass Effect 1 to make it a little more visually pleasing?
I say I'm of two minds with the visuals. There are some visual changes that I really, really like. I love what they've done with Eden Prime. I had like no real nostalgia for its original red sky, lightning, end of the world feel, and I really enjoy what they've done changing how it looks in the new one and upping the appearance of certain characters, especially your alien squad mates. The details on Garrus's face is just really, really good. But then on like the other side, there are some moments where I'm like, man, they just applied like a little too much like lighting to this scene, like especially for some of the human characters that are darker skinned.
Udina, what is going
like,
on with that man's skin?
Anderson in certain scenes, like the lighting is just I don't know, maybe it's the lighting a little bit off, or some of the textures not working with the lighting. I can't really tell. I'm not a game developer, so I don't know too much about it, but it just looks off, and I'm like, it's a little unfortunate.
Udina at some point is like when you first meet him in the Citadel embassies, like he has a weird silver sheen, and it's clearly like coming from the reflections within the Citadel, because when later on his skin tone is like back to normal, but there are those like moments where the lighting maybe just doesn't cooperate with the human models too much, and it does just look a little bit jarring.
What did you make of the kind of changes, visual changes, Jean-Luc?
I am very, very mixed on the whole thing. I agree with Jordan, where it's like, I think all the aliens look great, because I think it preserves the original spirit and just like cleans and elevates them. Same thing with like armor, any sort of like clothing, like it all just looks really sharp and clean. You go back to that original game and they look like 720p textures blown up, and they're just like, oh, they're rough to go back to. The overall tonal change, though, in terms of like just like the set dressing and the lighting, is so dramatically different, and I don't think I like a lot of it. It's like a good example that I think is actually like okay is like the Presidium on the Citadel. If you look at that and you compare it to the original, it's very different. It is more different than I think you would think it is, but it looks a lot like Mass Effect 3's version of the Presidium. So it feels like they're trying to line it up with how it looked like in the later games. And I kind of started to realize, like, I feel like that is probably the lens that they made a lot of the changes for, was trying to cohesively line up 1 to aesthetically kind of match 2 and 3 more. So, for example, the wards look very different because the skybox is no longer this, like, you know, dark city with like all the lights of the Citadel. It's now very bright, and it gives that whole area a different feel. A lot of the harsh lighting is gone. So like there would be areas where like characters were just like bathed in like a blue or reds, and that is significantly toned down. I do feel like it kind of loses some of the unique visual identity that first game had. It gives it a very different look, and I'm curious to see how everyone feels about it, because I think everyone's going to have kind of their own take if they prefer it or not. And you know, obviously I have the perspective of having played so much Mass Effect 1 that I'm like so accustomed to how that looks, but I think it does ruin some shots. Like there's a scene with Saren after Eden Prime, and they have this scene where he's basically like looking straight at the camera, and he's kind of got his hand covering his face, but you can see his eye shining through in the original. In the new one, the lighting is different, and you can't see his eye at all. So like the whole framing of that shot doesn't work anymore. In the original, everything is very much bathed in darkness. You can't really see much outside of like Saren and Benezia there. In the new one, they've lit everything, so now you can see the background, and you can see this sort of like kind of stark, empty environment that you weren't really supposed to see. So you get a lot of weird things like that, where it's like by trying to kind of brighten up, you see more of the flaws in some of like the environment that they were kind of trying to mask with that very sort of like intense saturated lighting that they were going for. It's just, I don't know, it's so different, and it's closer to 1 and 2, but like it's closer to 2 and 3, but I think it's just like 1 had such a unique look because of that lighting that it does feel like it kind of got lost.
I think the thing that you picked up on that is really interesting to me is like the visual identity of Mass Effect 1 in its original form that was created almost by accident, by like I don't know about the limitations, but like the implementation of like the lighting systems back then. Like a lot of that stuff felt like it wasn't intended to be that way, but because it was that way, it became a stylistic choice that we associated with Mass Effect. Like those rooms that you walk into and there's characters just bathed in a red light. And you look around the room and you're like, this probably isn't the way they wanted it, but you remember it in your head that way. It's iconic. And that shot of Seren with his eye glowing that way, I don't know if they meant it that way, but it's certainly something has been lost because of it. At the same time, there are other things that, I don't know, maybe my memory is like bad, but like sometimes I'll go into an environment and be like, oh snap, I don't remember that, or I've forgotten it. And the fact that I'm seeing it in this way is so powerful. Like on Eden Prime, for example, the Reaper in the distance, that's like, as you're approaching, it's like lifting off so slowly. When I played
smoke
that,
trailing after it.
yeah, exactly. Cool. And like that was like genuinely like stopped me in my tracks. And that was the first place that I pulled up the photo mode on and spent a good 15-20 minutes lining up an amazing shot of like Shepard looking like from a really low angle shot looking up at this towering Goliath of a thing. And I was like, that's really cool. And I know that like my memory is rubbish, but I don't think it stood out with such stark contrast back in the day, because like in the same way that some of the weird technicalities of lighting in the old version created iconic moments, they also could have lost iconic moments, and those ones are being created now in the new version. Like that feels like a new iconic moment for me. It wasn't in the original.
I will agree to that on some level, because the final planet you go to, Ilos, is like this ruined city. And I remember it looking really cool in Mass Effect 1, but not really fully understanding like exactly what they were going for with it. There's a level of clarity to how it looks now that I found myself looking around a lot more and appreciating like, oh, this is like a city and I'm in this like kind of courtyard area here, and I found myself like kind of getting more what like they were trying to go for with the environment in a way that I didn't. So yeah, like it is. That's why it's like it's a mixed bag, because it is like this. It feels like some things maybe are highlighting more of the original vision that the limitations weren't able to capture, or and also like, to be fair, like for all my gripes, it is a lot of fun to just like see these environments in kind of a new way with a new coat of paint. Like it did bring up this like renewed nostalgia where it's like, oh, like, you know, seeing Vermeer like this lush with like the water and the plants, like it does capture a certain like spirit to it.
So those are the two main big changes, and in a lot of ways the game's the same for the most part, the rest of it. So with that in mind, like Lucy, how does the rest of the game hold up? The things that people know and Mass Effect and love Mass Effect for, the writing, the characterization, how is that holding up for you all these years later? Has the passage of time kind of dulled any of the impact of that at all for you?
Honestly, no. And so we, I mean, as a team, have been revisiting sort of Mass Effect lore, etc., quite a lot recently. And even though I've been spending all that time just rewatching cutscenes and kind of doing that to, I don't know, like get ready for Legendary Edition, even when I'm in the game and it's my Shepard talking to Tali, and it's my Tali, and you know she's explaining the plight of the Quarians and you know their relationship with the Geth, it's still so impactful, and I'm genuinely like it's so funny because it's like a game that I've seen and played so many times that it's like even now when I'm going around the Citadel and it's like, oh, this is the bit where I get to go see Garrus, like, oh, I get to go see Rex, and immediately like the first thing I did was go to get Liara, and you know those characters are still incredible, and like they're like just kind of going back and seeing them at the beginning, knowing what you're about to go through kind of makes it for me even more impactful. I think if you are new to Mass Effect, I think you're still going to be in it for a fantastic ride. Like that opening when it's, you know, Shepard like staring out of the window and you get the brief kind of explanation of what's happening and you're thrown into the fire is still incredible. And, you know, our friend Simon is playing and he's texting us at the same time. And he's like, I'm into this. Like, I've just spent 2 hours walking around the Citadel, talking to everyone because I just want to know more about this world. And that is the thing that BioWare does so right. It's like in all of their games, but especially in Mass Effect, where the world is right and the world building is right. Like it has rules, it has lore, it has history that's so rich and so dense, and so whatever story you tell in it, especially one that's as like just well done as Mass Effect, it's just gonna work, and it does, and it's still like some of the lines is just still so iconic and still so good, and time hasn't tarnished them at all.
So just to wrap up kind of the discussion around Mass Effect Legendary Edition, Jordan, just kind of like summation of your impressions so far, and obviously you played it once, I believe you said, but you haven't come back to it. Is it something that you're glad that you're able to experience again, and how does it make you feel about the prospect of playing 2 further games that you're more familiar with?
I say I'm really enjoying it. It feels almost like I'm playing through parts of it again, because I played it only once, and that was 7 years ago. So it's been a really long time, so I am able to play through parts of Mass Effect 1 and be like, I have no idea what's supposed to happen next. I'm like, oh right, I'm going to Novaria next. This is going to be cool. I can't remember anything that happens during this mission. I think it works to attract a new audience in. I'm enjoying it a lot more than I ever did, primarily because of the improvements to combat, and it's really, I think it's going to be really cool to just get a better grasp of how certain aspects of the original Mass Effect evolved into the rest of the trilogy and influenced other BioWare games like Dragon Age. Seeing things like helping Garrus track down a doctor, getting the armor for Rex become the loyalty missions, how Paragon and Renegade choices evolve with interrupts and stuff like that in the later games. It's cool to go back now and play the original Mass Effect and be like, oh, there were a lot of things in Mass Effect 2 and 3 that I liked that I didn't really see in the Mass Effect 1 the first time I went through, because I was kind of not enjoying the combat, so I was not enjoying the game as a whole, and I was just kind of like trying to get through it. And now that I can kind of stop and enjoy my time and go through it and do more missions because I'm enjoying the shooting aspect of it, I'm noticing a lot of really cool things about the game that will inform what the rest of the trilogy evolves into.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're all pretty excited about going into the next few games as well, because those games are considerably better in my mind, and that's where all the things that the Mass Effect, the first Mass Effect kind of laid down as a foundation, really start firing on all cylinders, and really, they, as Michael Hine would say, hit different. With that in mind, are there any things that you've picked up on as, you know, standing out as being particularly egregious in not being good? I mean, for me, a lot of it is like, some of it is like fundamentally what Mass Effect is, like some of the planet exploration stuff and that kind of stuff. Like, it's not great, but is there anything really egregious that is worse now and was in the last game, or because of the changes, other than perhaps like aesthetic stuff and presentation changes, is there anything that really sticks out that you feel like needs to be brought up, just in case people are going into it expecting a perfect, I mean, no game's perfect, but needs to be raised?
Yeah, I would say kind of to what you said, like, it's, I think, more a byproduct of what Mass Effect was when it released in 2007. Like, the way that Liara kind of just throws herself at you, like the romances in general, I think in the first Mass Effect game, like, they do not match what they will become in Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. So I think if you play the first Mass Effect and you're like, I can't believe people are like, oh, I love romancing Garrus, like, because the romances in this Mass Effect game just aren't good at all. It's like, give it another game. I swear they get significant. The jump in quality from 1 to 2 is very
I did Liara's romance, and I was like, oh, this dialogue is bad. Like, BioWare has come a really long way with that stuff. And yeah, maybe that's for me probably the most thing, is just like some dialogue is feels maybe like a little stiff, a little unnatural in spots. Some of the pacing, that game does take a while to like really get going, you know, like you have Eden Prime and you have the Citadel, and that stuff's all great in its own way, but it takes a while before you like properly get your ship and kind of get the freedom to explore. Also, I think as much as I appreciated it back in the day, like how methodical it was, where it's like you need to fly back to the Citadel and then you land and then you got to take the elevator down to the, CSEC and then you can like fast travel. In Mass Effect 2 and 3, you can just fast travel to any spot on the Citadel immediately when you go there. So like stuff like that eventually grates on you, especially if you're doing a lot of side quests and you're going back to the Citadel. Like you will get very comfortable with that hangar and that elevator. It is still
why is there not a fast travel thing right outside of Normandy?
Exactly. Like that's all they needed to do to fix it. And like little stuff like that where you're like, okay, they ironed these kinds of quality of life stuff in later games. Like that stuff's still present. They don't fundamentally change any of that.
Okay, cool. And then Jordan, apologies, I'm going to speak for you a bit here, but you've put up your review in progress, which is basically early impressions of Mass Effect 1. But the plan is for you to continue playing, play through the entire collection, and then update your review and finalize the score, right? And then we'll probably knock out a video review with all that finalized, which maybe likely Jean-Luc will edit.
Jean-Luc made a motion.
I'm sorry, Jean-Luc,
like
you're going to be on one more Mass Effect.
You warmed up your fingers. Like
he loves it. He loves it.
I'm ready. I'll do Mass Effect stuff all day. I don't care.
Great. There you have it. Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Cool.